Hi everyone, this is Sunette, and I'm here this evening with Kim Scudamore.
Hi. Hi, Sunette. Hi,
And
everybody.
hi everyone, thanks for joining. And this evening, Kim and I will be discussing avoiding conflict. And within this, we're going to share some personal experiences that we faced in our lives in relation to avoiding conflict, because what we found is that it is an interesting dimension or an interesting part of our lives that can come through in many different ways. So, Kim, would you like to share where you in your life first noticed this experience of avoiding conflict?
Mm. Yeah, for me, mainly it was, you know, very early childhood, being a child of parents that were quite authoritarian, who I think came from the generation where children were seen and not heard. So I think from very early on, I was taught to be quite quiet and not express myself necessarily, or if I did, I quite often got shouted at. And then obviously, as I went through school, specifically my comprehensive school, which is sort of 11 to 15 in the UK, um, there was a period of time where there was bullying, and it, at a point in my life where it was quite, how can I say, I was somebody who was new to the area, so it was a different kind of school for me, and everybody else had come from their primary school to the senior school together. So I was kind of like the odd one out, the new girl in town kind of thing. And I think because of that, I was always quite quiet. But when I did express myself, it was met with some kind of animosity, and there were lots of problems really. And I ended up getting punched in the face quite a few times, just for expressing myself. So I think very early on I learned just don't say anything. It's easier just to be quiet and go along with them. And I think it got to the point where I joined in with them because it was easier than trying to, fight them, if you like. So
Like
how
so,
it
it was
started.
so it was easier to kind of fit in with how and who you must be in relation to how you perceived them and
Mm,
what they expected from you.
yeah,
Uh,
I always assumed that when I spoke, it was um, not that I would get hit, but I just assumed that when I spoke, I didn't have anything of any real value to say. So it was always a case of I was always very wary of who I spoke to and what I said. So I would gear up my conversations with certain people and avoid those that I thought would, be um, aggravated by me.
all
Yeah, so
right.
I would seek out certain individuals and avoid others. So, it would limit me very much as to who I spent time with.
Yes. I can also relate to that in school. In the
Mm,
dynamics of school, where being different. Um, was also you would be singled out, if you were in any way
mm,
different.
mm,
Um, and I would also be part of a group of friends, and so I would always be like very selective of my opinions, what
mm,
I would voice, what I would say, and it's interesting how often I would just be quiet and listen
mm,
to what everyone else is saying and how everyone else is saying it, all things, and then within that also kind of go along those lines, because I've also found, also with gossiping, that's also something that's
mm.
quite extensive in school, where they gossip about other people, in terms
Yeah.
of, hey, have you heard what they're saying or how they're looking at things or viewing things?
Mm,
And those other people would look at things completely differently, essentially
yeah.
have their own opinions and perspectives, but they'd be
Mm,
gossiped about or singled out or ostracized in some way or another. So I
yeah.
would keep to myself and not really say what I would have wanted to say, because I knew that I would be attacked or singled out or ostracized in some way or another. So it's like avoiding conflict in from that dimension or perspective as well.
Yeah. No, I think for myself as well, it was the same, because I was able to, because of what I do as a job, and when I realised I was clairvoyant, I was quite young, so I assumed that everybody could do this, and I used to walk around in this kind of bubble of my own existence, if you like, thinking everybody was able to see what was going on. They could all, everybody, this is normal, surely. But I discovered very early on that it wasn't something that everybody could do, and I think this was part of it as well. I think people assume I assumed that I kind of isolated myself, if you like, and shut myself away because of this, because I then thought I was odd, a bit strange, and then I gave myself all those judgments, and if you like, I created my own prison to hide in, sort of thing.
Right. So I think many people will be able to relate to this context of avoiding conflict in relation to any experiences in school years that's developed there in when you had, and you knew you had different views, opinions, perspectives, things that you wanted to say and do but didn't, because you wanted to rather fit in. So from there, I mean, this is obviously coming from the schooling years. So have you, for example, found, I mean, the question that we've got to ask ourselves is, where does it come from? Where does this point of avoiding conflict in relation to friends at school, why do we deal with conflict in that way, as in suppressing ourselves, rather than speaking up and confronting conflict when it does come our way? So my question is, was there anyone in your family or in your early years that you copied or learned it from, that you can remember?
Yeah, I think very much probably my father, really, because he was always very laid back and quite non-confrontational, and he was the one I think really was the main role model for me. My mother and I had quite a lot of conflict, talking about avoiding conflict, but we were quite conflictual. But he was the one I wanted to be most like, because I saw that he seemed to be more at peace in himself. He seemed to be quite calm and stable. He actually wasn't, but on the surface of it, to everybody else he was. So I think I related to him more so. And that's where, and my youngest brother, if you like, he was also very much like my father. So I related to those two figures really more than any of the females in my family.
Okay. So was it basically that, based on what you've observed, like over the years or the time spent with your family? The experience. So actually, it would basically show that, I mean, you could already determine or assess within yourself that, okay, here was my experience of conflict with my mother, and the reactions and the emotions that were involved were just, not a nice experience. And then there was the other living example, which was just to kind of suppress, just keep quiet, just be agreeable, say okay. And I mean, that experience is obviously a lot more preferable, which within what I'm seeing here is that we again don't know how to, in moments of conflict, deal with it effectively inside ourselves, and as well as with the other person, because there's a lot of reactions involved, emotions, thoughts. You become someone that you also don't so much like. I don't know if you can relate to this as well.
Yeah.
Where it's like you're almost afraid of a part of yourself as well when you are faced with conflict.
Yeah, it's definite. That's definitely something I can relate to, and I think I'm not the kind of person that is very confrontational. I don't tend to have that in me. I find it very difficult to stand up for myself. But if I have to, then it kind of comes out in a barrage of doesn't make any sense. I may approach somebody 2 or 3 days later after having them being confrontational with me, and I will suppress it and walk away, and then something else will come up later on, and it just comes out, and nobody knows really what it was all about. So then it's confusing because it's I suppose it's like children, isn't it? They tend to if you tell them off and you don't explain, or you try and discipline them and you don't explain it properly, they don't really understand what they're being disciplined for. Quite often parents will discipline the children way after the event, and they don't know why. So I think I can relate it to that almost.
Like now going from whichever parent or any family influences from how conflict was dealt with. It's either being confrontational or avoiding it. But within this as well, like avoiding the conflict is, I found for myself as well, it's like you're not really avoiding it as much as you are actually suppressing the conflict that is coming up inside yourself. I mean, when someone is being conflictual toward you, and I mean, how do we all mostly respond to other people's emotions or friction and reactions and things like that, is with equal emotion, thoughts, backchats and things like that come up. So like some have been more equipped to suppress everything that's coming up inside the mind, and then but what do we know about how suppression works? It's like it bolds, and it can bold, and then in the future it comes out either toward the person or you take it out somewhere else in your life. So it will come out in some way or another. So I mean, like what we've looked at thus far is, for example, having a look at conflict in school, the parental influences, also in terms of how avoiding conflict is not really so much avoiding it as it is suppressing things that are coming up inside yourself. So the dimension that I'm also having a look at here is, okay, but why would we take ourselves into a point of suppression, of the thoughts and reactions that's coming up inside yourself? So in other words, Kim, I don't know if you can find a moment in your life where you did go into that conflict inside yourself. You did speak in those thoughts and those reactions.
Yeah.
Did it create like a fear inside yourself of that part of you? That you'd rather suppress it than bring it out?
Yeah, definitely. Because I found that when it did eventually come out, I remember it was kind of years and years after leaving school, if you like, where after sort of 3 or 4 years of, I wouldn't say it was intense bullying. There was probably one person in particular that was responsible for it, and I would avoid this person, very often. But so I wasn't the subject of everybody picking on me, but I realised because of all this suppression that what had happened is, as time had gone on, I think I was about 18, somebody had approached me in the street and being quite aggressive for no reason. I didn't even know this person, and I ended up fighting with them. And I was quite I was actually surprised at how this aggression came out, and I wasn't even, my friend was saying to me, or the person I was with, she said, you were doing this and you were doing that and you were really, really going for it, and I thought you were going to kill her, and but it was because, but I didn't know, and I wasn't almost aware of it, if that makes sense. It was just, it just all came out in this flood of suppressed emotions and and upset, really. So that's the only one time I would say that it really showed itself to me as an aggression.
I'm looking at that inside myself as well. It's like there's that part of me that in the past was aware, like I can feel this emotion coming up, and these thoughts and the nature of them, and it's like, just keep it in, keep quiet, just agree, because if you're going to blow up and they're going to blow up, it's just going to be an explosive moment.
Yeah.
Right. So that's maybe something that everyone can also have a look at for yourself. Like what is involved with, or what relationship did you create inside yourself around conflict? Is it in relation to you fearing a part of yourself, or because I mean, this is also something we touched on in relation to how we can also project, that moment of conflict onto others, where we would think
definitely.
that if we, for example, speak up or say what we want to say and how we want to say it, that that person, it could bring out something, frightening inside the other person, when in fact, it's like we're actually projecting how we would be in that moment onto the other person. So, I don't know, have you got a moment or a memory of where that happened for you, Kim?
I think for me, I found that I sort of I went towards people that were quite forthright in my sort of late teens, early 20s, when I started dating and actually going out with boys properly. I would always go for somebody that was quite not necessarily aggressive, but that had that that air of confidence about them, that air of being quite confrontational, maybe a little bit arrogant, because for me it was almost like I could be quiet and sit back, and then they could take on the role of being the man, but actually it had the effect of them being abusive to me, because it was what I was expecting from them, if that makes sense. It was like I was projecting my own. I was projecting outside of myself what I think I was burying inside of me, if that, onto them, and they were living out my own. They were living out. It's difficult to explain, but I think you get the point of what I'm trying to make.
Yeah, it's like I'm just looking at, for example, with me, where I was looking at a moment where I was also in a particular situation with someone, and was like just in their tonality and general behavior of taking on the point, like coming at me with certain papers and saying, do this and do that and do this way and that way, and you didn't do this right or that right. And it was like I wanted to, for example, like say something, because the information I knew within myself, that the information that they were sharing was not all accurate or factual and correct, but just in their voice and behavior, I was like, if I'm going to speak up now, they're probably going to blow up in my face. So therefore, that's what I meant by that moment of projection. It's not necessarily to say that they would have blown up. Maybe if I were in their shoes, if I were them, that's how I would have reacted. We think that how we project how other people is going to react defines them, but it actually defines yourself. So, or not only that, or it represents a fear, that you're fearing that that's how they're going to respond. So you're just projecting fear onto them. So then all I would do is I'd just keep quiet, and I'd say, okay, and I would just do everything all over again, for example. So it's like interesting just looking back in my life as well, like how many moments I compromised myself, and time and effort and work, just because of that fear of conflict and trying to avoid it. And then not only that, but this also then brings us to the next dimension, which is how you would go to the extreme of just pleasing everyone,
Yeah,
keeping everyone happy,
yeah,
making sure that you stay in line. Like I became very good at being able to do that, like speaking, saying and doing as how I would perceive everyone or what everyone would expect from me. Always staying in line. Never ask questions, kind of just do as I was asked. This especially in my family years, school years, things like that. So, always the good girl.
Me too. Yeah, I can relate to that. Yeah, and I think sorry, had you finished?
No, you go ahead. You go ahead.
Yeah, there was a fear of not being liked and then having to face that conflict again. It was easier just to toe the line, to have the quiet life, just to be, easygoing and seen as easygoing, and then afterwards try and deal with the frustration of not being able to actually speak as you wanted to speak, or I face that quite a lot where I'll go along with the other person to a point, and then I will afterwards I'll then judge myself and berate myself for not actually speaking up and saying what I wanted to say. And then you have all these kind of dialogues in yourself and these imaginations and these backchats of what and then you sort of you then create conflict within yourself and beat yourself up, so it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it?
Yeah, that's an interesting dimension you just opened up there. By avoiding conflict outside of yourself, you actually create it inside yourself. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. So yeah, I've sort of many layers to it, I think, hasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I'm just looking at another dimension within this. Kim, when you go into that moment of avoiding conflict, I'm just looking now at most people can relate to some of the dimensions that we've opened up now, but for those who have looked at what we've discussed thus far, maybe also to give some more reference points, like Kim, what happens inside yourself, or do you notice any physical response to that moment when you're avoiding conflict? Like, how do you change in that moment?
Yeah, it's very physical for me because I experience it as a tightness, or a tensing up. I notice it mainly in my shoulders and my sort of solar plexus area, where I'll just for a moment, feel very uncomfortable, like I'm not being true to myself. My body will remind me of this. It's almost like, go on, it's saying, go on, just say what you want to say, just speak it. It's fine, I'm looking after you. It's, and I'll completely go against that, and then that then creates problems. And but yeah, there's definitely a physical aspect to it, that's for sure.
Okay, yeah, because I'm also just looking at what had happened with me as well. Is I would specifically like bow my head down and like just go yes or okay, go into that group mode, but like almost really crouch like inside myself in my physical body. And what also happened, interestingly enough, is like I'll go into like a quietness inside where I'm like holding myself, and I think that I'm not reacting, and I think that I'm stable, but it's like I go into like a robot mode, actually, like just keeping everything quiet, keeping everything still, just not saying anything, not doing anything, just whatever the person is doing or saying, just say yes, no, and keep it as is, don't speak up. But what I'm also looking at, that's opened up for me in relation to all of that is where, right, you're, for example, keeping quiet and holding yourself as stable as possible. Yet there's a part of me that knows that, if I'm going to speak up in this moment, I'm going to speak within emotion. I'm going to speak within reaction. So
Yeah.
also later on in my process, I would use, when conflict comes my way, or when I perceive conflict is coming my way, that, and I feel a movement is coming up inside of me, I'd first breathe and stabilize myself with awareness, as much as possible. Because I think, if I look at those moments where we're avoiding conflict and going into suppression, that a part of you knows rather also just stand back,
Yeah.
because if you're going to do or say anything now, that reaction is going to bring out that part of you,
Yeah.
that you don't necessarily like so much, if you will, or that
Yeah.
you could even be afraid of. And because that's also something I've noticed in terms of going into conflict with someone, how it can escalate, and it feels like you don't have control of the moment,
No.
like I was afraid of that as well when it came to conflict.
Yeah.
Just the intensity of the emotions, the voice, the behavior, the fact that things are going to come out there that I would not know how to direct or how to handle. So
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
just, rather
Definitely.
than facing all of that, just keep quiet, stand back, just walk away.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you can. I used to walk around with a. I can only describe it like a buzzing feeling of fear. Expecting everybody to be conflictual. I would go into a social situation, say in a bar or something, and you see people around drinking, and you would almost expect there to be some kind of aggravation or some kind of argument, or so you would put yourself into a state of preparedness almost. And this is something I kind of trained myself to do. So I was like a walking ninja, walking around expecting everybody to kind of attack me, and I had this air of arrogance about me, and I would shut down to people, so so people wouldn't come near me, or they'd try and talk to me, and I didn't, I would try and be on the defensive straight away. So
Okay,
that yeah.
yeah, so that's interesting then, because that would show how the that fear of conflict and the avoidance thereof would become a paranoia in a way.
Yeah,
Like
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
you're then afraid of that part possibly coming out in anyone.
Yeah.
Um, right. So you said then that you would go to a point of avoiding people. Have you noticed also then, like when you're communicating with people, in your voice tonality, that your voice tonality pitch will be higher, or your
Yeah.
smile will be wider, or just your behavior would be kind of like, here's all this positive energy,
Yeah.
just
Trying to
be
keep the other one
really,
happy. Yeah. Yeah.
just be really nice with me here. I don't
Yeah.
want any conflict.
Yeah. Yeah. It would go. I think with men it was more aggressive, but with females it was a lot more friendly, and nice, and yeah. So yeah, it was different with different genders. So, which is
Okay, that's
something I've only
interesting.
just realised. So yeah, that was interesting. That was kind of I would say my late teens, sort of early 20s again. I was very, very fearful of other women. I think more than men. Very strange.
All
Yeah.
right. All right. So now, with covering quite a few dimensions in this hangout,
Mm.
Kim, have you recently or at any time like had a moment of where you've been facing this particular personality of avoiding conflict? Um, how did you face it inside yourself or change it inside yourself? Anything that happened that supported with the realization and understanding how to
Mm.
support yourself within this particular point.
I don't think there was any one moment or any one point that I could pinpoint here. I think mainly it was the realization that it was something that I, it just I started once I started walking process, and I became calmer in myself, and I could see that there was this kind of conflict in me, and I stopped that, and I um, started to walk with self forgiveness. It kind of just stopped anyway. There wasn't any conflict around me anymore. It was like the tide parted and it was quiet.
Okay.
But I experienced that quietness in me. And because I experienced that quietness in me, it was quiet around me. And that was only through realizing that I was creating it myself.
Okay, so would you, for example, say that with your fear of conflict and then, kind of nested inside yourself and then
Mm.
building a personality of avoiding it,
Yeah,
that kind of also, made you either be on the lookout for it all the time, to a certain extent also
mm.
attract it in your world? I mean, because
I
this
did,
is
yeah.
still this is still how things work. I mean, if you, for example, are holding a fear of conflict inside yourself, I mean, it
Yeah,
starts resonating in you on many levels. And within that, even in your voice or in your behavior or in your interactions, you're
mm.
going to, for example, send out, if you will, that
Yeah,
signature of, oh, I'm fearing conflict,
mm.
and could on certain levels or dimensions of other people, activate conflict or
Yeah,
any dimensional form of conflict within them. And
yeah,
then so you're kind of actually opening up the doors
mm.
for potential conflict to manifest in
Mm.
your reality. Now, this is not so much based on the law of attraction or anything.
No,
This is simply we're living in a world in a physical body made up of physical matter, and we're sharing this physical reality with many other physical bodies. And within that, we've got our minds, also integrated into the physical. And
mm.
so, what or who you are within your mind, within your body, and how you're living and expressing that is what's going
Yeah,
to materialize or manifest in your life and in others, one way or another.
definitely. Yeah,
So, it's a very interesting reference, then, Kim. I mean, where you've then walked through the fear of conflict within yourself and the avoidance thereof. So, is there any recent memory of where conflict did come your way? I mean, how did you handle it?
the only, yeah, I would say it's an ongoing thing really, because in my work, specifically with the guy that I work for, he operates at quite a high level of stress all the time. So you sort of he creates this atmosphere of better make sure he's in a good mood before we speak to him today. It's that kind of feeling. Um, and what I've found is because since I'll go back a little bit here and explain that by walking the people pleasing character and the within that the fear of conflict, this is when the quietness started. So I've calmed down a lot within myself. I'd say certainly over the last 2 years, I kind of resonate this calmness. I don't have that buzzing kind of fear anymore. So what was interesting is that when he has been approaching me recently, he's been saying that the situation is calmed by just talking to me, or he'll come in in a bad mood or whatever, and he'll start to kind of become anxious or angry, and then he'll say, "Oh, I'm just angry. I'm sorry. I'll just go away for a few minutes, and I'll come back to you once I've calmed down and we can talk again." So I think he's becoming more aware of the fact that he's being conflictual, and that's not because of anything I've said. It's just because of, I don't know. Perhaps it's because of what he's getting from me now. I'm not walking around in this fear of and trepidation of conflict. So he's not responding in the same way.
Yes, definitely. I mean,
Mm.
if we have a look at it, if for example, person A is in a lot of stress and emotion and things like that, and
Mm.
person B then comes with also that equal energy, it's going to
Yeah.
be two explosions, coming together and creating that friction, which can go into conflict, because I mean, this is essentially what we tend to do in those moments of conflict. It's not really so much defined by that moment as it is that we are creating that space where we're allowing each other to, offload in a way.
Yeah.
So
feeding each other, aren't we?
yes, exactly. So with you, just resonating just more of that calmness and his emotions like also busy happening inside of his mind, if you're not feeding it or instigating it or anything, what happens fascinatingly enough is his energy or his emotions can just start discharging inside of himself and then calm down and come back to you and equalize with your calmness. Because I've realized that myself as well. I mean, with my relationship to also people pleasing, to avoid conflict as much as possible, where what I started doing was, okay, when conflict would come my way, you later in life start becoming so equipped at being able to just know, okay, how this person's voice is or behavior is, conflict is coming. So I would first go, okay, Sunette, first check yourself. Are you reacting? Is there anything moving? And I mean, it actually took, because this is something that I built up as well most of my life. It took me a couple of months to get to a point where a person with conflict can come my way, and I would just be quiet and stable, or there would be a movement inside, and I'd breathe and I'd do my forgiveness, but I would quickly be able to ground myself, and then as the months progressed, I could start moving myself and my voice or sound in such a way where if the person is coming at me with their voice and emotion and intensity, it's like I would naturally become more calm, more stable, like really slow down my voice and speak within. And I would keep saying and showing the same thing. And sometimes, fascinatingly enough, the person would start becoming even more conflictual, try and bring out more emotions. And then what I would do is I would sit back and say, okay, talk it out, throw it at me, bring it, release as much of that energy as you need to. And then, they would start with it, and then I would see if I can come in again, and then I would speak a little bit again. My voice calm, but it's not that my voice is calm or stable. It was all of me, like my whole presence in myself and my body would be just calm, stable, and then the person would shout a bit, and then I would try and speak, and then see if I'm speaking, how are they communicating back? Is it still with more reaction, or are they calming down a bit more? So you kind of like have to assess, when can you speak again, or when do you just have to sit back a moment? It's like you're directing that moment quite well.
I used to be able, well, I still can, and I can usually read people's emotions anyway when they come towards me, so I know whether or not they're in a state of flux within themselves, if you like, a state of conflict, and they're not saying something, but that their voice is saying one thing, but their body is saying something different. And what I've experienced, not for a while actually now, but what I did experience at one time was that people would be dead calm and talking quite normally with me, and then they would then become aggressive for no reason. It would just kind of just come out of them. And then they calm down again, and it was like, well, where did that come from? Why did I suddenly just become, but it was, so yeah, it was interesting to observe that, but it hasn't happened for a while. But yeah, with my boss, he would be fine, and then he would become very aggressive, then he'd be fine.
Yeah, I think, like, for example, with those moments, it is just how to deal with the unpredictable. That even in the unpredictable, you can just move yourself into that stability, being grounded. It's like you're, for example, standing in that moment as the potential of how and what the person can be. It's like you've
Yeah.
got to be the support for them in that moment. You've got to be that calm, that stability, and maintain it in your voice. Like I would later on, also start playing with my voice tonalities. Like sometimes I'd bring in a real gentleness. Other times I'd have to make my voice a little bit deeper. It's like I can play with my expression in my voice and see how my presence, whether it be the word stability or calm or gentleness, or serenity, or expressions would just naturally start coming out within me to be the best support for that person who is coming at me with conflict in some way or another. So I think for everyone here in relation to the avoiding conflict and fear of conflict, the suggestion that I would have is to first and foremost prepare yourself to be the living example for someone else in moments, where you first make sure that when conflict comes your way, you're clear, that you don't speak or react and physically respond with emotion. And once you've got that practiced in, then when conflict comes your way, you start practicing speaking in the voice of stability or calm, and expressing yourself, because within that, the whole conflictual moment, rather than it going into an explosion, it goes into a point of support.
Yeah. And you can discuss it then, can't you?
Yeah, definitely. It's like mostly in reflecting back in all the moments where I've avoided conflict, or where conflict in some way or another came my way. It was never really personal, both from my side and from the other person's side. I mean, all of us are dealing with so many things in our minds and in our lives on a daily basis. We're accumulating so much emotion. And these types of moments can rather be for those of us who are walking this process, who are more aware of our thoughts and emotions. We can be points of support. We can create moments of support for ourselves and for another person. So when emotional conflict comes your way, just remember to take that step back and realize, okay, all of this is not really personal. Let me be myself, calm and stable. Let them unwind and release, and help myself and them to get to a point of stability. And let's have a decent conversation here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what people want, really, deep down. They're when they come at you like that, they have no other way of knowing how to express it. That's all what they know. That's all they know. So perhaps something in their childhood has come up that's made them be this way. When they come at you like that, that's the only way they know of communicating sometimes, and then their frustrations come out and they can't always control it. So, knowing that about them, then you're able to work with that as well, aren't you?
Yeah, definitely. But the main gift that I found within this is with me being grounded and stable and calm, you also develop a trust within yourself I don't sometimes know what I'm going to say or how the moment is going to unfold, but within me remaining stable throughout it, I trust myself to speak in the moment, to really listen and hear what the other person is saying and how they're saying it, and being able to direct the moment to the best possible outcome.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So, Kim, do you have anything else to share for this evening?
No, I think we've covered everything.
Yeah, we've covered quite a few dimensions. I'm sure everyone can take a little bit from all the dimensions that we opened up, and for each one to investigate, and introspect for yourself. Just observe yourself, like learn from yourself in terms of seeing what happens inside yourself. How are you reacting to avoiding conflict? Working through the fears of conflict. Also, what personality did you develop to avoid conflict? And start practicing using the moments where you're noticing the fear and the avoidance. And the key within all of this that I found is not having any emotion. I mean, if you are just aware and you're really hearing and listening and looking at the moment, the person, yourself, and the information, you are very much empowered to take that moment and direct it to the best possible outcome for yourself and for another. All right, so let's have a look if we have any questions for tonight. Don't see any this evening. So we must have then covered quite a few nice dimensions here. All right, everyone, thank you very much for being here and for listening. We hope that what Kim and I both shared will assist and support you in your process of facing conflict. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thanks very much, Kim, for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. Bye.
Bye-bye.